Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the novel Just Dance by Patricia MacLachlan. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about the big question that Sylvie has about her mother. We learn on page 2 that her mother had been a classical soprano. And on page 6, Sylvie talks about that one day she was in the attic of their house and she found large posters of her mother. At that time, her mother was going by the name Melinda May, and she was dressed in taffeta or silk dresses, seen in great halls with fancy chandeliers above her. And later in chapter 1, on page 10, Sylvie thinks to herself, I wonder why my mother, is happy singing in the shower instead of wearing a big silk dress and singing for a huge audience, who, when she is finished, leap to their feet and applaud. And then on page 11, she asks, how could she leave that behind, being happy and famous as a classical soprano, to live on a farm in the middle of the prairie? It is hard to believe that loving my father is enough. It is hard to believe that Nate and I are enough. And that means it's hard to believe that my father, my brother, and I are enough to make my mother really, truly happy. Sylvie has these questions in every single chapter. So if we move on to chapter number 2, on page 21, her mother comes into the kitchen holding a page that has a picture of James Grayston, her singing partner from days of old. And on 22, Sylvie thinks to herself, my mother is wrong. It's not the same at all. Singing here on the farm, to the family, to the animals, is not the same as performing on the concert stage. She says she could sing on stage with James Grayston if it weren't for us. If we were not her family, she would still be traveling through Europe, still singing opera, still having people applaud and clap for her. So she wonders, are we enough? Are we enough to make my mother satisfied, to make her happy with her life? And on page 31, her mother tells her at the top, your father is fascinated by the secret lives of crows. Of sheep, crows, birds of the field, and he's right. They all have secret lives of their own. One of the reasons I love living here. Sylvie takes a deep breath and she asks, but don't you miss singing on stage? And her mother goes on to explain that James was her past, but here, living on this farm with her family, is her present. And her father adds, and the future. And Sylvie at that point wants to say to her parents, but it is not exciting and glamorous. We're just here on the farm. But in the end, she didn't say anything to it. And so these questions keep popping up, and she gets a little bit of good advice, some counsel from her friend Sheriff Ludolph. On page 39, she comments to the sheriff, mothers are a mystery. And he responds to that, surely not your mother. And then Sylvie says, she could be famous. She could be famous. She asked that big question once again. And continuing on in that chapter, Sheriff Ludolph shares with Sylvie that he likes to listen to Sylvie's mother as she's singing on the farm, that sometimes he'll stop his car just to listen to her. And he says on page 40, your mother brings me great joy. She brings me great joy. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to page 51. again, she's talking with the sheriff, and again, they're driving around, and she's talking about her mother. And Bud points out that she sings for us. She sings for us. And Sylvie turns to him and she frowns, and he sees her frown, and he says to her, maybe one day you'll know why. And she's like, know what? And he answers her in kind of a not so clear way, but he wants to get her to question. It's your job to find out what? It's your job to find out why she's happy singing here, why she sings for us. And then on page 57, Bud gives her a haiku that he's written about her mother. And the haiku says, birds fly down to hear, sweet song for both sheep and man. She sings to bring joy. And that seems to be the answer to the question that Sylvie has. But as you continue reading the chapters, you'll see that Sylvie is still not quite satisfied with that answer. She still wants to know, is her mother happy living on the farm and singing to her family, singing in the shower, singing to the farm animals? Is that enough for her mother? I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you.